It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I'm joined in the studio today by Arundel County Councilman Jerry Walker. Jerry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So we got a whole list of things we want to talk about. You're not from this area originally.
No, I'm not.
You are from?
New York City. So until I was 18, then I left, and I've lived here for over 20 years here in Maryland.
How many years have you been serving?
6 years. I was elected in 2010, the end of 2010. And of course, the terms are 4 years, and we're limited to 2 terms. We can only serve 2 consecutive terms on the council, and the county executive's term limited as well. And so I got reelected in 2014. And
so this is it.
So this is it. Yeah, this is my final last 2 years on the council.
And aspirations beyond this?
Absolutely. I'm definitely going to stay involved in public service. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time on the council. All of my experience in my work life and my career has been in the private sector, and my undergraduate's in business with a concentration in economics, and I found that very helpful. But actually what I did was when I got elected to my second term, I actually went back to school, and I just graduated with my master's degree in December in public administration and public policy.
Well, congratulations.
So, yeah, and it's mostly driven by the fact that I've enjoyed public service and really want to get better at understanding how the academic side of government, I understand now the on-the-job training sort of part that you get thrown into as an elected official, but now I've got the academic side of it as well.
So maybe county executive run?
That's definitely in the future. There's no question that is a long-term goal of mine. It's definitely there. Right now, I'm leaning pretty heavily towards the legislature for the next term, waiting for County Executive Hsu to serve out his last term. He can serve 2 terms as well, and his term limited. And so my goal is that when he's done serving his second term, to come back and run for county executive.
Great. What do you perceive, and what areas do you cover? Where are your constituents?
Sure. My constituents are District 7 is the number that I represent, and each district has different size geography on the county but it's based on population. So we have about the equivalent number of residents that we represent. And my representative, the base is about 75 to 80,000 residents, and my area covers most of Crofton, Davidsonville, Riva, right up to the South River. So if you follow south of the South River, that's all me. And then Council's District 6, which is Councilman Trumbauer, who represents the city of Annapolis and the Annapolis Peninsula, is right over the South River. So I'm everything south of the South River all the way down to the Coward County line.
In my history in this county, which goes back many years, I've never seen so much concern as I have in recent history coming from the Mayo Peninsula, and rightfully so. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the last 6-8 months has been they've been a very loud and vocal community, and are getting more and more organized and paying attention to what's happening in local government.
As I said, rightfully so. Originally, when I started hearing these arguments, and I'm thinking, this is a case of NIMBY, not in my backyard. When I took a ride down the Mayo Peninsula and experienced the one road in, one road out, I realized quickly, this isn't just not in my backyard. They have a legitimate argument, concern about this one road in, one road out.
Yeah, and I don't think it's an unusual concern either, frankly. I think there are a number of peninsulas. Obviously we're blessed to be right near the water. It's one of the benefits of living here in Anne Arundel County. And so that's sort of naturally, we have a lot of shoreline, a lot of rivers, and a lot of peninsulas. And so when you have peninsulas, the traffic is not always the best getting on and off of them. Some of them have, up in the Pasadena area, you see some areas where they have that center lane that has a X and a red arrow, red X and a green arrow, so it switches back and forth. And so, but the one thing that the Mayo does not have is that, and we really don't have the flexibility down there to expand and add that third lane, even if we wanted to, really because of the size of the ditches on either side of the road. And so the state doesn't have the funding, is what I'm told, to expand that. And so it's a legitimate concern that they're voicing. And I think from my perspective, that the timing is sort of unfortunate, because I do support the concept of opening up parks and allowing access to parks and allowing folks access to the water. In fact, in this last budget, the county executive introduced part of his plan, included a boat ramp down in Shadyside, and I didn't oppose that at all, even though that is a peninsula. As well as Mayo, but the folks down there weren't as vocal or concerned about it. They seemed to think that it would fit into their lifestyle. And the beach access was another issue. And down there was only just talk of a boat ramp. The issue in Mayo is twofold. One is that the sewer moratorium has been in place for, I think it's about 6 or 7 years. And so there really has not been any building on the peninsula. So there's sort of a backlog of folks who own property, who legitimately want to build a house on that property and have been unable to do that because of the sewer moratorium. And that problem is
about to go away.
It's about to go away, and the moratorium is going to be lifted. It's about a $30 million-ish project that expanded the capacity on the peninsula.
By putting a tunnel underneath the South River, taking the sewage from there over to the Annapolis water treatment plant, and then making the water treatment plant on the other side to be built into something else.
You got it. And that's being lifted. At the same time, we're having this discussion about large expansion of parks. And if you look at the plans that are even on the county website right now that are generated by the Department of Parks and Recs, the concern is that, as an example, that it adds about 1,300 parking spots on the peninsula. But when you look at all of the different parks that they want to expand and open up.
Hold that thought on those 1,300 spots, because we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the parks. I'm Donna Cole. This is the 1430 Connection. We will be right back. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me today is Anne Arundel County Councilman Jerry Walker. He represents Crofton, part of Edgewater up into the South River, and the Mayo Peninsula. It's a big territory to represent. We're talking about development on the Mayo Peninsula right now. We're talking about the concerns of the community and parks. So what's going to happen to the water treatment plant that's about to be not needed anymore down there?
That's one of the park expansion projects that's slated on the county executive's long-term parks plan, and that in that facility alone, I think there's 600 proposed parking spaces.
And then where are the other parking spaces?
There's like 4 other parks that basically would be expanded to combine the total of 1,300.
All of them on the water. And by expansion, we're talking about adding impervious surface, which, as we all know, isn't helpful to the Chesapeake Bay.
Sure.
Is there a way to make everybody happy?
I think, from my perspective, the easiest thing to do would be to put the brakes on pretty hard and maybe throw it in park, if you would, on the actual park expansion until folks understand on the peninsula what the real impact of the potential of this moratorium, the sewer moratorium being lifted is. I think that's part of the concern. We don't know exactly how many homes are going to be built, which means we don't know how many additional folks are going to be added to the peninsula as a result of the moratorium. That's a large capital project that the county's invested a lot of money in, and so I don't see that stopping. It's almost done at this point, and so it's hard to put the brakes on that, but the parks is something that we can put the brakes on. The level of concern is such that even at the council, we've had a consistent number of 30 or so people that come down from the Mayo Peninsula and speak on different bills that affect their area or development in general. The real issue was back in the summer after the budget was passed with the initial park expansion that was proposed, there was over 500 people. The local paper reported 200. We actually counted when we were there, and there was a sign-in sheet of about 470 folks who actually signed in. We counted over 530 heads in the room that were all there, and there really was not anyone speaking in favor of the park expansion. Everybody was there saying, no, we don't want this. That's a lot of people.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, and it's the largest, I have to say, it's the largest community meeting I've ever been to, short of a budget hearing, when you have folks from all over the county. When you're talking about a little local community, 500 folks showing up, that's a pretty loud voice.
Okay, let's go back to Central Avenue, 214, and you had said because of these ditches on both sides of the road, there's no hope for expansion anytime, ever in the future?
I don't see it personally, not without a rather significant investment on the peninsula, and I don't know that there's the traffic there to warrant it. In other words, the state's always going to look at how do we get the most benefit or bang for our dollar, right? Benefit out of the dollars we spend. There are certainly other intersections and other roads in the county where there's a higher volume of traffic that would raise to the top of the priority list pretty quickly as a result
I'm thinking
of the
Forest Drive again, right?
Forest Drive, Route 3 in Crofton is another big issue for me and on the other side of my district. So that corridor has 50, 60, 70,000 cars a day that go through there. So for a small 7,000 or 8,000, folks that live on a peninsula, the state's not likely to invest significant sums of money down that way.
Okay. Does Beverly Triton, does that have the go-ahead already?
The way the budget was proposed last year was it included $400,000 initially in last year's budget to design and basically do feasibility. and then there was a $4.5 million. There was a gap. This year there wasn't going to be anything in this next budget upcoming, and then the following year there'd be $4.5 million put in to actually do the improvements that they were proposing. What happened was when a few members of the community started emailing, and I passed that along to the administration and some of the other council members, the administration decided to let's split the $400,000. We'll do $200-ish thousand this year, $200,000 next year, do some outreach to the community, do some planning and design, and then move forward with the actual project. So they split that up because they heard some feedback, but I would rather personally just see the whole thing, park expansion thing, go away at this point. And I think part of the argument is initially was that the parks were never open. Public didn't have any access to them. Now they actually are.
Right.
And there's just limited spots to park, and there's limited bathroom facilities and things like that.
And limited doesn't mean that there's not enough either, is another question. I've been down there and been the only car. I've been down there and been one of 3 cars. I've never been down there and seen 20 cars.
Right.
And there probably is room for 20 cars. It's a tight fit. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you think? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my concern is just...
Can they get by with what is there now?
I would suspect they can. Mm-hmm. I think the concern really is that when you expand that, then what level of people come? How much additional traffic, if you build it, they will come.
Right.
And if you look at, this is an example, when the whole process we were working through in the budget, Quiet Waters was brought up as an example of a large park project that people were opposed to, and that now that it's open, everybody's fine with it or whatever. But I think that is unique situation.
I do too. It's apples to oranges. Yeah,
it is 2 lanes in, 2 lanes out on that peninsula.
Right.
And also but the concern is, I guess, is that if you look at the volume of traffic through that park, I think it's like 100,000 folks between like March and August. I forget the exact dates, but the Parks and Recs department has all the figures up on their web pages to see how many.
There's also a dog park. There's a ice skating rink. There's a cafe.
Correct.
There's a gallery. Yeah.
Also, if you go to other parks, let's say Sandy Point, that's a large one with a beach,
Right.
which is what they're sort of intending to do at the end of the peninsula. That place is packed, and on the weekends you can't even get in there.
Yeah.
And then you look at other parks like Kinder and some of the other larger recreational facilities in the county. We track the number of folks that are going in there. It's thousands during those warm months, and that's what the people are concerned about.
Your bottom line is stop it. Just take it off the to-do list and let's focus on other things.
Well, I would say pull the plug on it temporarily and then see what happens with the moratorium, and then let's work on developing infrastructure.
We're going to take another short break. When we come back, more about what's happening in Councilman Jerry Walker's district. I'm Donna Cole. This is the 1430 Connection. We will be right back. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I'm in the studio with Arundel County Councilman Jerry Walker. We've talked a lot about the Mayo Peninsula. Moving on, let's talk about, for a minute, and it might be a moot point altogether, but we need to discuss it, the Rural Conservation Bill, which was proposed by County Executive Steve Shue. It basically drew a line and said everything on this side of the line is not going to be developed, and everything on this side of the line, go ahead and develop away. You opposed it.
I did.
Tell me why.
For a couple of reasons. The primary one is a property rights issue for me. One of the things that was not really talked about in the bill was this issue of when there's 2 different types of methods to go about rezoning a piece of property. One is to come to the county and ask for it, and that's in a once every 10-year process. And we went through that process in 2011. The applicant comes to the county, approaches the planning and zoning office, or comes to a council member and says, I'd like to have my zoning changed. The other piece is in front of the administrative hearing officer, which is sort of the entry level, what I would say is the entry level for the judicial system, if you will. They come to the administrative hearing officer and they say, I want to make a change in my zoning, and there's only 2 arguments that are allowed in the law. One is there's been a significant change in character. In other words, around me, the properties that were there are now changed dramatically. Or the other one is that the county made a mistake when they initially zoned my property years ago. So this bill, if you were on the other side of the line, the more rural side of the area, would actually remove someone's argument for change in character. So it actually took away a right that they had previously under the bill, and would create a situation where if you were on one side of the line, you had certain rights, and when you had on the other side of the line, you didn't have those same rights, which was a problem for me. Second of all, I think, one of the arguments the administration made was this argument that where water and sewer goes, there goes development. And I think, generally speaking, it's a short little line that makes sense in your head. But when you look at the actual numbers behind it, I'm not quite sure I completely agree with it. Mm-hmm. And here's why. If you look at a small community, let's say Woodland Beach in Edgewater is a perfect example. Small houses, quarter-acre lots. When you go to put water or sewer into those communities that are already existing, the county charges the homeowner a certain fee for installing that water and sewer in the street. That fee ranges based on the number
length of the driveway,
length of the footage that they have out on the road. Their front foot is what it's called, front foot assessment.
Right.
And that cost usually runs on a small little quarter-acre lot. It can run as much as almost $200 a month. So for somebody who has a quarter-acre lot, it's talking $200. If you go into South County where you've got a 5-acre lot, or
it's
a 10-acre lot,
over $100,000,
you're talking
right?
thousands and thousands of dollars, or on a month, and over a 30-year period, it could be astronomical cost. It's much cheaper to put in a septic system,
right,
or or drill for water. So I don't necessarily think that makes sense. One, and two, the other thing is the septic tier bill that was passed in the General Assembly by Governor O'Malley actually prevents that from really happening. And we had to submit those maps up to the state and say, here's where we're going to put water and sewer, and here's where we're not. And those areas are already protected. So they're protected by the cost on the one hand, I think, and on the other hand, they're protected by zoning.
Yeah.
We did away with family conveyance. Before I was on the council, they did away with that, and they changed the zoning to 1 house per 20 acres. And the bulk of my district, in the southern part of it, is zoned RA. And I don't see any future council members coming in and wanting to put in large tracts of subdivisions. They'd be pretty short-term council members if that was the case.
Living in a rural area has its disadvantages sometimes.
It has both. I think it's when you move into an area like that, you understand. Like I lived in a rural part of Gambrills, right on the border of Davidsonville, for a number of years. Mm-hmm. We lost our power all the time.
All the time.
So you move into that area with a certain expectation that, yes, you have a great drive home. It's beautiful. There's canopies of trees everywhere.
But your water
then
stinks.
You might have a septic, or you might have a well that you have to deal with, and you might lose power occasionally, more frequently than somebody who lives in, say, Crofton or the city of Annapolis.
Two things. Safeway in Edgewater, the old one. Mm-hmm. Any hope for that any time in the near future? You have a business background. Have you called who knows who and said, I have this great lot? Yeah, there's been a number of people who have talked to me about that. We don't usually get directly involved in real estate transactions or things it is of interest.
It absolutely is of interest. I'd love to see something go in there, and I think the community would too. That strip along between, the bridge and 214 there's been some improvements there, obviously, with the Lee Airport facility. Is a beautiful facility that folks have, really enjoyed, I think, and taken advantage of. Yeah. And so I'd like to see, something like that where it's, a little prettier down through that stretch. And if there's some way to revitalize that piece of property and do something else with it that's really nice and benefits the community. You're not hearing any gossip of somebody coming in? I've heard people who were interested in certain things, but nothing that's ever panned out to this point in time. Okay, school redistricting. This is not your area because you are south of the South River, but the communities and full disclosure, I'm in one of those communities north of the South River and south of Admiral Cochrane are dealing with the possibility of a school redistricting, and they're fighting it. And part of that argument is Edgewater kids in Edgewater schools. It is considered Edgewater. The reason why I'm asking you, and this is not your district, it could affect your schools down the road, because once Crofton High School comes in, what is your feeling about it? Absolutely, yeah. I'm opposed to moving those students, even though that's not my district. I have met with parents from across the bridge in Mr. Trumbauer's district here in Annapolis, and met with them and talked to them at length. And I don't agree that should be included in the redistricting proposal that's in front of the parent committee right now. It remains to be seen how the superintendent's going to deal with that, how that committee's going to deal with that. But I'm opposed to it. I think the parents, the most frustrating part for those parents, honestly, especially the ones at Edgewater Elementary, is that they have been the ones that have been leading the charge for a new school. Right. And when the new MGT study was funded by the council and then moved forward with by the Board of Education, they said revitalization on this school. I would have preferred a brand new school. I think that would have been, the preferable choice. That wasn't my choice, but it's what the Board of Ed decided, and so it is what it is. But those parents that were across that river, those are the ones that were really advocating fiercely for upgrade to that school. And so it's from their perspective, I can certainly understand how it's frustrating that they led this charge and they see the finish line, so to speak, and they're going to get this beautiful brand new school, and they're going to get yanked out of it right before the school's even built. So I can understand that. And yes, you're right. I mean, I think the part of the frustration from my perspective is that, yes, redistricting is important and you need to balance your schools and use seats that you have, but this committee isn't even allowed to look at the potential of this Crofton High School being built, which is going to draw 750 students out of South River High School and over into Crofton. And at the same time, we've got Annapolis High School at capacity, And so you're going to bring them back and put them into the Annapolis elementary schools, which are going to feed into a high school that's already over capacity. I don't see it making sense from my perspective. That's just kind of where I stand on it. But I have met with parents and supportive of them and in their opposition to being moved.
When does campaigning start for you?
In a couple of months. The last 2 years.
What position are you seeking?
Again, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm leaning heavily towards the legislature, probably like 90%.
Councilman Walker, thank you for joining me today.
No problem.
This is the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. We'll see you next week.